20 years ago, in a leaky warehouse on the edge of Los Angeles, the floor was covered in oil and the sharp smell of welding. Jesus stood in the shadows, watching this young man crouched on the dusty concrete. Elon wasn't sitting in a fancy office. He was staring at an engine blueprint, messy with coffee stains. Back then, rockets were a rich man's game, played in air-conditioned labs. One rocket cost hundreds of millions. You fly it once, you throw it away. It was like burning down a whole skyscraper just to light a candle. But Elon? He was like a man with a wrench, breaking into a royal palace. All he thought about was how to save every cent. He planted a seed that the whole world mocked. It was called rocket recovery. People said, "You want a fired bullet to fly back into the gun? That is impossible." But Jesus smiled, because he knew the law of the heart. To do the miracle, you must break the common sense. For this dream, Elon went through his own desert. He sold his cars, he mortgaged his mansions, he put his whole life on the line. When 3 rockets in a row exploded over the Pacific, turning hundreds of millions into giant fireballs, the ultimate test of faith arrived. The company had almost $0 left. Workers were already secretly sending out their resumes. Everyone was waiting for him to admit defeat. But he grit his teeth. He crawled into those burnt metal scraps, fixing it bolt by bolt, screw by screw. He knew one thing. The laws of physics do not listen to your tears. They only care if you dare to put your soul into the formula of thrust. This crazy, painful struggle was his way of showing the deepest respect to the universe. Finally, the gears of destiny, in that oily, smelly warehouse, started to click. It was cold. It was heavy. But once it started turning, no power on earth could stop it. 2008 was a dark winter. While the big bosses in Detroit were begging for government money, Jesus was walking through a small, struggling factory in California. He saw Elon taking his very last bit of savings and splitting it like pieces of bread to feed 2 hungry children, SpaceX and Tesla. On paper, this was a tragedy. The smart people said, "This money is not enough. You will be dead by Sunday." But Jesus saw in Elon, the young boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He did not look at how little he had. He looked at how much he believed. He thanked the heavens, and then he risked everything. The factory had no fancy robots then. Only sweaty young men, putting together thousands of cheap laptop batteries to make a car move. They were weaving a crown of power out of common things. Jesus saw that Elon was not just building a car. He was trying to light a lamp that didn't need the oil of the earth. In the very last hour, when the money was almost gone, the miracle happened. The contracts were signed. The bread was enough. The fish multiplied. People called it luck. But Jesus knew, when your will is 100% pure, the universe will find a way to feed your dream. The wind from the Pacific was salty, but at the launch site, the air smelled like a funeral. Jesus walked among the twisted metal, the wreckage of Falcon 1's 3rd failure. Millions of dollars, years of hope, all turned into a giant firework over the ocean. This was Elon's River Jordan, but his baptism was not with water, it was with fire. Jesus looked at the man. His face was as hard as a rock in the wilderness. The media laughed at him. Investors called him a failure. Even his own followers started to doubt. Truly, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. Jesus whispered, touching a scorched rocket leg. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. In that moment, the Silicon Valley genius died. Elon crushed his own ego. He became just another bolt on the launch pad. He didn't pray for a miracle. He worked so hard that he became the miracle. They had only one chance left. Elon put his soul on the table as the final bet. He went back into the scrap heap, checking every micron of the engine with his own eyes. And finally, on the 4th try, when the fire tore through the dark night, the rocket didn't explode, it soared. Jesus saw a soul that was broken by reality, then rebuilt by fire into something unbreakable. That is nirvana. True power is not about never falling, it is about rising on the third day with bones made of steel. When the rocket finally landed upright, the whole world was screaming in shock. But Jesus saw the loneliness behind the straight gate. Elon chose the path that the smartest people in the world were too afraid to take. Broad is the road that leads to destruction, Jesus said, looking at the big aerospace CEOs in their fancy offices counting their profits on the easy flat road. But Elon took a group of madmen to the edge of a cliff. He wanted to make a falling tower of steel land as softly as a dove on a tiny platform in the sea. It was a challenge to gravity and a judgment on common sense. Every line of code was a prayer, every blast of gas was a breath. In the eyes of the greedy, this was just about money. But in the eyes of Jesus, this was correction. Elon knew, if we don't lower the price of heaven from millions to thousands, humanity will always be a baby trapped in a cradle. He pushed open that straight gate with blood on his hands. But he showed the world, if you drop the heavy bags of how things are usually done, your soul can fly, and even a falling rocket can find its way home. Jesus stood on the red dust of Mars. The wind blew through the empty valleys, a place with no life, only billions of years of silence. But far away on Earth, a mortal man was pointing at this red dot and calling it the Promised Land. Elon's dream of Mars is not about being a king. In the eyes of Jesus, he is building a Noah's Ark for the 21st century. While everyone else is fighting for an inch of land or a cent of profit, Elon is looking at the sky with fear. He is afraid the light of human consciousness will go out like a candle in a dark room. Keep watch, for you do not know the day or the hour. Jesus watched Elon working day and night on the Starship. It is not just a transport, it is a covenant. To save the seeds of humanity from the gravity of the earth and bring them to the unknown wilderness. This requires a sacrifice. The sacrifice of a genius's peace. The sacrifice of his sleep. The sacrifice of his own happiness. Elon burned himself to ashes on this altar, just so the fire of life could jump across the vacuum of space. Jesus knew this was great love, because he loved the soul of humanity more than his own life. The old, leaky warehouse is gone. Today, Elon stands in the bright lights of the world, still wearing his wrinkled black t-shirt, with eyes that carry the tiredness and the light of a survivor. Jesus stood at the end of time, looking back at this long journey to the stars. He didn't see the world's richest man. He saw a madman who used his body to prove the word made flesh. Elon used wrenches and blueprints to write a new gospel in the cold universe. Willpower is the lever that moves the divine. Let those who have ears listen. Hardship is not a punishment, it is a selection. Failure is not the end, it is a baptism. Every hole in the road, every explosion in the sky was a witness to the universe. That when a man is willing to carry the cross for all of us, even the laws of physics must step aside for his faith. In that old warehouse the gears are still turning, but they are no longer just cold machines. They are the sound of a great purpose. When the first pioneers step onto the Martian dust and look back at the tiny blue dot, they will remember the young man who crouched on a dirty floor. They will remember his faith that never went out. Jesus faded into the light, leaving one last word: in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, for if your faith does not die, you have already overcome the world.